Okay, good evening. So Parsha's Vayeitzei, lots to talk about. The Parsha begins, Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva, Vayelech Chorona. The Yaakov Avinu leaves Beersheva and he goes off to Choron. And Rashi famously tells us, Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva. If you're looking at the first box, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. Says Rashi, Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva, Lo yitzarech lichtov, ela Vayelech Yaakov Chorona. Famous Rashi doesn't need to tell us Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva. We know that. V'lomo hizki yitziasa. Why does it have to mention that? It should just say Vayelech Yaakov Chorona. Famous question in Rashi. Ella magid sheyitzias tzadik min hamakom. Famously, Rashi tells us this teaches us that the departure of a tzaddik from a place, isolation, it leaves an impression. Shebizman she'atzadik bo'eh, when there is a tzaddik in town, who haida, he is the marvel of the town. Who ziva is the splendor, he hodra is the magnificence of it. Yotza misham, but once he leaves, pona haida, the marvel goes, pona ziva, the splendor goes, pona hadra, the magnificence, the wonder of that place goes. That's the famous Rashi. Now, last year, or the year before, I forget, we mentioned the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar asks a kasha. We'll quickly chazer the two answers he gives, but this year I want to give a third answer. The Kli Yakar asks the following question. If you look at the next box. This is not the first time one of the Avos is traveling. Avraham left certain places, Yitzchak left certain places. Why does the Torah have to teach us, why does Chazal have to teach us that that when a tzaddik leaves a place, it leaves an impression? Why dafka with Yaakov Avinu? Why does it say Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva? Avram made exits, Yitzchak departed from certain places. Why doesn't it say the same thing with them? V'yesh panim lekan lekan. Very interesting Kli Yakar. This is we mentioned previously, so I'll do it quickly. Yesh panim lekan lekan. Ki lefumriata de levusa nokat. It's coming to teach me a chiddush. Vayeitzei kan vayeitzei. Ki Avram v'Yitzchak. When Avram and Yitzchak left their places, lo hinichu b'mokum shehalchu misham tzadik k'moisam. When Avraham left a certain place in the course of his life, when Yitzchak left a certain place in the course of his life, he didn't leave a tzaddik behind in that city. So pshita she'it yotzam v'yisirashim. So it's clear when Avraham left the place of his birth. So of course that there was an impression on that place because it had a tzaddik. It no longer had a tzaddik. Avokan, but the chiddush over here is Yitzchak v'Rivka nisharu sham. Yaakov Avinu is going, but Yitzchak and Rivka were staying there. So Sal Kadai Tchamina might have thought that maybe his departure wouldn't leave such a big impression because after all, Yitzchak and Rivka are still there. Kamash Milon, still that his departure does make an impression. That's the first answer. Second answer, Yesh lefarish le'idich gisa. You can actually interpret it the other way around. Loima shedafka yisyasa shel Yaakov osoroshim is dafka the departure of Yaakov which left an impression. Avlo yitzias Avram v'Yitzchak. Why? Lefi shehema halchu im kol bnei beisom v'lo nishar b'makom shum tzadik. Because when they left, when Avram left with his family, and when Yitzchak left with his family, they left no one behind. So therefore there was no one to appreciate the fact that they'd gone. Al-Kain, lo osoroshim bizosam. Ki harashoim shenishoru shama, ein makbidim al yitzias tzadikim. They don't care that a tzaddik has left town. But on the contrary, they're happy that they've gone. Because it's bad for their conscience. Etc., etc. But if you go to a place where there are tzaddikim, because the tzaddikim who are left behind, it's difficult for them, for a tzaddik, a fellow tzaddik, to depart from town. Because they enjoy a tzaddik being in town. Etc., etc. Those are the two answers of the Kli Yakar. Very nice. A third answer, I heard a few years ago, Rav Baruch Jalowski. I don't know if you know him. He is Norman Turner's son-in-law. Do you know him? He's an up-and-coming rising star in Eretz Yisrael. He's a Rav in Ramat Bet Shemesh. And he's a good speaker, and he came to school a few years ago, and he mentioned this Kli Yakar, and he gave a third answer. This is what he said. Avram and Yitzchak were very famous. Everyone knew about them. The Rambam says that Avraham Avinu had tens of thousands of students. So he was a well-known personality, a well-known figure. Yitzchak, everyone knew about the Akedah. That was on everyone's lips. So yet, you would think, so if they were to leave town, of course it's going to make a Roshan. That's obvious. I don't need to be told that. But Yaakov Avinu, no one knew about him yet. He was an Ish Tom Yoshev Eholim. He would sit quietly and attend a non-Torah. He was not a public personality. So one would think, when Yaakov would leave, who would know? It wouldn't make an impression. Kamash Melon, says Rashi, Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva, Vayelech Chorona, that Lomo Hiski Yitzyasu, Magid Sheisiyah Sadik Min HaMokum, Oiser Roshem. Even a tzaddik, who no one knows about, it makes an impression. And that's a very powerful idea. I remember some years ago, I was in Bnei Brak. I forget which occasion it was. Baruch Hashem, I went many times, but I think I went once with my son, one of my boys, to go before his bar mitzvah to visit the Gedolim. So I went to Bnei Brak, and I had a certain person I knew. He would offer to take me around. You know, you need always someone who's got connections and knows the times and everything. So he said to me, I'll take you to the well-visited Gedolim, and I'll take you to a few others that no one knows about. Okay, that was intriguing. So we went to the famous Gedolim, the Chaim, and I forget many others, and Nissan Karelitz, and others. And fine, that was always very, very powerful. But then he took me to off the beaten track. Certain people, he says, mark my word, it's worth getting a bracha from this person. And you just went into a base of medrash, there was an Alti sitting in the back, sitting and learning. But the point is that no one knew about him. This guy happened to know about him. But that is the power of an Ish Tom Yoshev Eholim. And that's exactly what Rashi is telling us. That even though he wasn't well known, and he didn't have tens of thousands of Talmidim like Avraham, he wasn't famous like Yitzchak because of the Akedah, but still, Ish Tom Yoshev Eholim makes a ration. That is the power. And I must say that, everyone is doing their bit for Klal Yisrael right now. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we should have Basuras Tovas. But the Bnei Yeshiva, I heard someone told me that in the Chevron Yeshiva, they've set up a system where they're learning round the clock. So you go to Chevron Yeshiva at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, there'll be boys in the base of Medrash. Like in Volozhin of old. Why? Because that's what we're doing for the effort. Amazing. And the power of an Ish Tom Yeshev Eholim should not be underestimated. Okay, let's press on. So, Yaakov Avinu then leaves town, and he comes to the well, and he sees Rachel for the first time. So take a look at box 2. Let's just go through the Pesukim, and we'll see something very interesting. Vayikash ero Yaakov is Rachel, and Yaakov sees Rachel for the first time. Bas Lavan Achi Imai, the daughter of Lavan, who is his mother's brother, Rivka's brother. Ve'esayin Lavan, he sees the flock of Lavan. Vayigash Yaakov, and Yaakov approaches. Vayogel es ha'oven me'al pi ha'be'er, he just rolls the stone off, this heavy stone, they can't move, he just rolls it off. Vayashke soin Lavan Achi Imai, and he gives to drink the flock of Lavan, his uncle. Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel, Vayiso es koile vayev, he embraces her and he cries. Vayaged Yaakov l'Rachel, and Yaakov says to Rachel that we're mishpacha, ki achi ovio, they're related. Okay, Rashi explains exactly what that means. V'chi ben Rivkahu, he is the son of Rivka, therefore they're cousins, they're first cousins. V'atorotz v'taged lovia, she runs and tells her father. Vayhi kishmaya loven es shema Yaakov, ben achoisa, he hears that Yaakov has come. Vayoras the krosai, he runs to greet him. Vaychabek lo, and he embraces him. Vaynashik lo, he kisses him. Vayveo basically brings him to his house. Vaysapel loven es klad vorm, and he tells everything. Fine, those are the psukim. Says Rashi, 2 points. Vayev, when Yaakov sees Rachel, he cries. Why does he cry? So Rashi gives 2 pshatim. Says Rashi, lefishet sofa b'ruach hakodesh, because Yaakov, when he saw Rachel, he saw b'ruach hakodesh she'ena nichneses ima likvura. He's not going to be buried with her, and therefore that was a very sad realization, and he cried. That's the first pshat in Rashi. Second pshat in Rashi, dovacher, lefishet bo biodayim rekonyos. He came empty-handed. Omer Eliezer eved avi abba. Eliezer, my grandfather's eved, Avraham Avinu, my Zayda's eved, Hoya biyodov nezomim utzmidim umigdonos. He had all these pearls and luxuries and fine things. Va'ani ein biyodi klum. I've got nothing. Why did Yaakov have nothing? Says Rashi, Lefishe rodaf Eliphaz ben Esov b'mitzvas aviv. Eliphaz, the son of Esov, comes running after Yaakov. Achrav lehargoi, on the instruction of his father Esov, he comes to assassinate Yaakov. V'esigoi, and he catches up to Yaakov. But because he grew up in his grandfather's house, in Yitzchak's house, Moshach Yoda, he held back, he didn't kill Yaakov. Amaloi, but Eliphaz said to Yaakov, what am I going to do with my father's instructions? My father said, I've got to kill you. A mitzvah is a mitzvah. My father said to do, what shall I do? Amaloi Yaakov, Tulma Shebiyodi, here's the answer. Take all my earthly possessions, V'ha'oni choshev kameis. Yeah, this is a medrash, it's a Gemara in the Nedarim, that there are 4 people who are considered like a mace. One of them is an oni. Therefore, take all my goods, all my possessions, and therefore, I'm like a mace, and you have fulfilled the directive of your father to kill Uncle Yaakov. Rabbi Simcha Zissel Broid is the Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron, we just mentioned Hebron. He said the following simple question. I can understand why Yaakov Avinu cries that he's not going to be buried with Rachel. I'm sure there's very deep meanings about being buried together and whatever that may mean. But he cries about that because there's a spiritual aspect to it. But he cries because he comes empty-handed. So he hasn't got money. That doesn't sound like the obvious. Is that such a disaster for Yaakov Avinu? He cries because he doesn't have material wealth. Since when does material wealth have so much value for Yaakov Avinu? So Simcha Zissel Broider gives a very interesting answer. The answer is, Yaakov Avinu was disturbed about the problem of kibbud aveim because he wept because it would bring shame to his parents. It would bring shame to his parents that he'd come empty-handed. Avram Avinu was a wealthy man. He came, Lavan appreciated that. If he would come empty-handed, there's a pagam, there's a little bit of a blemish, as it were, on his parents, and therefore, says Rabbi, he wept because it would bring shame to his parents. Yitzchak and Rivka, as I've written here, were aware that Lavan had not forgotten Eliezer's arrival with camels laden with gifts, and here Yaakov had nothing to offer in the way of gifts. That doesn't sort of shed Yitzchak and Rivka in the best of light, and that's why he cried. Now, interestingly, he says something very beautiful which supports this. At the end of last week's Parsha, when his parents tell him to go, it says, Vayishma Yaakov el Oviv el Emoy, Vayelech Padeno Aram. And he goes to Padan Aram. It says Rabbi Simcha Zissel Broider, the Hebron Rosh Yeshiva, the Torah could have said, you know why he went? Because he's fleeing from Esau. Why does the Torah say, Vayishma Yaakov el Oviv Emoy, Vayelech Padeno Aram? The answer is, because do you know what really drove him? The Torah is teaching us that the primary reason that he went is not because he was running away from Esau, but because his parents told him to go. That's exactly the point. So Vayishma Yaakov el Oviv el Imoy Vayelech Padan Aram, because his parents told him to go. That was the primary reason. Yes, Esau was out to get him, but that was the secondary reason. The primary reason was kibbud aveim, an astonishing idea. Now, on that second idea, Rabbi Hartman makes a very interesting observation. We just said Eliphaz ran after him, and Esau had told him, you've got to kill Yaakov. So he came, he caught up with him, he was going to kill Yaakov, and then he held back because there was a sort of a nitzutz of Kedusha. He grew up after all in the house of Yitzchak, he held back. But then he said, what shall I tell my father? My father's instructed me to kill you. Take all my property, and oni choshev kameis. Fine. Says Rabbi Hartman, a very interesting observation. There is a deep-rooted need in every human being to be self-sufficient. What is pshat oni choshev kameis? Why is oni choshev kameis? Because there is a deep-rooted need in every single person to be self-sufficient. What is it rooted in? It's rooted in the concept of na'ama de kisufa. Na'ama de kisufa is a very interesting concept. A lot to say, but just a bekitza. The first parak of Mesilas Yesharim, at the beginning of Derech Hashem, the Ramchal discusses the big questions. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create this world? What's it all about? The answer is, says the Ramchal, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a meitiv. He wants to do good. What is the biggest good he can possibly do? To pleasure us, to give us incredible hana. Where is the mokum of this hana? Olam haba, not in this world. How do we get there? He creates something called Olam Hazeh. If we go through Olam Hazeh, then we will, if we earn it, we'll get Olam Haba, and that is the Mokum of Idun, that is a place of total enjoyment and pleasure, of reward for hard work in this world. That's the Ramchal, the famous, the beginning of Derech Hashem and Mr. Shor and Perek Aleph, etc. Why didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu just put us straight in Olam Haba? Why have we got to earn it? HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have just taken the neshamas and put us straight in Olam Haba. Why have we got to go through this sometimes very challenging world for 70, 80, 90, 120 years? Well, why? The answer is Na'amah Kisufa. Na'amah Kisufa means you don't want to be a person who gets free gifts. Na'amah literally means the bread of embarrassment. The moshel. Yeah, I use this moshel in school a lot. I think the kids understand it. Imagine you get a kid who does a summer job. So he's going to work in Grudziński. My kids, most of them, they worked in Grudziński over the summer. I think it's very good educationally. They work a few weeks, they get paid, whatever they get paid, £6 an hour, and they suddenly understand what money is. Right? It's a useful education for them. So a boy in school, let's say, works in Grudziński for a few weeks, he gets £6 an hour. 5 hours a day, £30 a week, 5 days a week, £150 a week, works for 4 weeks, £600. Good. He gives his maasik off him, and he's now got £540 left. That next Motzei Shabbos, after he's been working for 4 weeks, he's going to celebrate. He's going to go out with a few friends and he's going to buy himself a shawarma. That shawarma will taste a lot more tastier than if he would have got £10 from his mum or dad when they would say to him, I'm going out with some friends Motzei Shabbos, can I have some money? And they give him £10 and he goes buys a shawarma. Because you work hard for something, you enjoy it more. If you're given a free gift, there's a tinge of Na'amah Kisufa. I'm sure many boys would happily accept the £10 on the Motzei Shabbos to go buy a shawarma, but it's Na'amah Kisufa compared to if you earn it. That concept of Na'amah Kisufa is a deep-rooted need in every single person to be independent and to earn our keep and to do things ourselves. Now, if it refers to finances and to money and to physical things, then it certainly relates to ruchnius. And therefore, Rabbi Harman says, Kal v'chomer. What does that mean, a deep-rooted need to be self-sufficient in ruchnius? The answer is, it could mean in Torah knowledge, that we shouldn't settle for second or third or fourth level. We should try and aspire to greatness. For example, we should aspire to have a working knowledge of halacha, to be proficient in Torah. That you don't have to ask. You can look up. You can know where to look. Many questions. It's not really a shaila. It's just amratzas. You just need to open your ear to have the basic working knowledge. He was very taken some years ago. He came across a couple whose parents are very wealthy, but they chose not to be supported at all, and they live a life of poverty in Eretz Yisrael. They're Klei Kodesh, but and the father-in-law told Rabbi Hartman that my children, they're oni mirotzen. Oni mirotzen, that means they are voluntarily poor. I've offered them, but they don't want, which is an interesting concept, very rare. Most aniyim are not an oni mirotzen, right? But they chose to do that. And yet, when it comes to ruchnias, some people choose to remain unlearned. And it's not really an excuse because there's opportunities. Rabbi Hartman tells a story, and I can say this because he tells it publicly, he tells it, and he's giving me reshus to say it. But when he's an exceptional person. So when he was in yeshiva, he was ashamed of her already then, aged 21, 22. And one day a guy comes over to him and says, "You Yeshua Hartman?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Rav Gustman, not Rav Gustman. It's not who is from the I've forgotten his name now. A legend in our lifetime. What's his name? They just put out a sefer on him. A legend in his lifetime. They used to call him the Disco Rebbe. You know what I'm talking about? Rabbi Yisrael Grossman. I said Gustman. Sorry, it's Rabbi Yisrael Grossman. I apologize. So his father was Rabbi Yisrael Grossman, right? So he was a dayan in Eretz Yisrael. He was a very choshev Talmid Chacham, and he says Dein Grossman wants to see you. So he says, me? He says, yeah. He didn't realize this Dein Grossman had a daughter. He was thinking of making a shidduch. And this was like a faher to even begin before he even would go, before he accepted the shidduch. So Haman calls in, knocks on the door. He was learning, he goes in. You're Yeshua Haman, yeah. Come take a seat. They schmooze a little bit. And he says, tell me which Siddharim do you know? Siddharim, there are 6 Siddharim. Noshim, Bezikin, etc. So Haman says, I've been in yeshiva, for a few years. So, okay, which Masechtas do you know? So he says, well, we've learned a few Masechtas. So which ones? What do you mean from beginning to end? Well, the yeshivas you normally learn the first, 20, 30 plot maybe on a good year. He says, okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Right? Rav Haman says that about, it was the first time he was exposed, as it were, to someone who had aspirations that a 20-year-old, 21-year-old should know, complete Siddharim. Should know that means a half, a third of Shas. That a person should, and that was the expectation. That's what he was looking for. So this concept of being an Oni Choshev Kameis is rooted in the concept of Na'ama D'Kisufa. Na'ama D'Kisufa, if it applies to finances and to Gashmias, then certainly it applies to Ruchnias. And therefore, we should aspire to be sort of, as it were, aspirational and certainly self-sufficient when it comes to matters of Ruchni. Okay, let's press on with a couple more ideas. Again, one is another idea from Rabbi Hartman, very interesting observation. Later in the Parsha, Leah gives birth. And the first child, of course, is Reuven. The Pasuk says, V'ata Leah v'ateled bein, v'atikra shmei Reuven. And she calls his name Reuven. Why? Ki omra, ki roa Hashem ba'oni, HaKadosh Baruch Hu see my affliction, ki ata ye'evani ishi. Now, my husband will love me. Now, that's what the Pasuk says. Why? Because the Parsha Pshat, I suppose, is that Leah felt that Yaakov Avinu loves Rachel, and now I've given birth, I've made him into a father, therefore there'll be a special bond between me and him. That's what the Torah says. Rashi quotes Chazal and gives a totally different reason. Why did they call him Reuven? Says Rashi, Vatikra Shmei Reuven, Rabbi Seinu Pirshu, Omra, she said, Re'u ma bein b'ni leven chami. See the difference between my son, Reuven, and the son of my father-in-law. Who's the son of my father-in-law? So it's Leah talking. Leah's father-in-law is Yitzchak, right? Leah's father-in-law is Yitzchak, Yaakov's father. The son of my father-in-law is Esav. Esav mocha haBecher Yaakov. He sold his birthright to Yaakov. And my son, Reuven, v'zeh lo mocher Yosef, he didn't sell out. V'lo irer alav, he didn't complain when Yosef got the Bechera. You got 2 tribes, Menashe and Ephraim. V'lo oid, not only that, shelo irer alav, ela shebikish lo yitzim min habar. He was the one who tried to rescue him. So Reuven is a sort of a contraction of Re'u ma bein b'ni leben chami, Reuven. So how interesting. The Torah gives one reason, and Chazal give a totally separate reason. How strange. What's going on? The answer is this. There's many riots for this, now's not the time. But the Torah always says things which are tangible, which you can see with your own eyes. Ki roa Hashem ba'oni is the reason now. And that's tangible. I can see that now I've got a son, Yaakov will spend more time with me, there'll be a special attachment between, that was real, that was happening now. Chazal can say things which are not seen. For example, there are many instances in the Torah where Chazal tell us about things. Dinah was put in a box. Where does it say that in the Torah? It doesn't. Why? Because she was in a box. She was hidden. It's not visible. Anything which is not visible, the Torah doesn't really speak about. Therefore, the Torah talks about something which is visible and tangible. Ki roa Hashem ba'oni is visible, it's tangible, it's there, you could see it. Chazal can say something which is not seen. Yosef is 17 years old now, but the Nevuah will come true, in the future date. He wasn't even born. This is Reuven's birth. This is, when this happened, Yosef was 17 years old. So this is way down the line. This is 20 plus years down the line. So Chazal can talk about something which is going to be Al Shema Osid, but not something which is right now. Okay, I don't think there's time for the last psak. The last Dvar Torah will take a few minutes. We're over time. Miz Hashem, Kodesh Baruch Hu should give us kerch. We should meet again next year, Parsha Vayeitzei, in Eretz Yisrael. Miz Hashem. Okay, we'll leave it there. It's later already. Okay.